Through the first quarter of the 21st century, various sitcoms have staked their claim to be the next Friends, but How I Met Your Mother is the one that came closest. The show clearly took a large helping of inspiration from its forerunner, as the New York-based story about a group of friends in their late 20s, early 30s who frequent the same local hangout for a drink most nights of the week, to dish on one another's love lives. Many fans of both shows have even drawn parallels between most of their main characters. In place of Friends' lovelorn paleontologist Ross Geller, for example, How I Met Your Mother has Ted Mosby, an architect with an equally checkered romantic history. An older version of Ted is also the show's narrator, with its framing gag being that he takes an inordinately long time to tell his children the titular story, 9 seasons of How I Met Your Mother, in fact. As Ted meanders through his story, the sitcom endears us to its characters by depicting early adult friendships that feel as authentic as they are special, just as Friends did the decade before it. How I Met Your Mother is the one that came the closest to surpassing Friends. It's a similar show with almost as compelling characters and romances. Both in terms of its sustained success as a comedy about young friends enjoying life in New York and the popularity of its romantic character arcs, How I Met Your Mother is the nearest thing the past 20 years have seen to the sitcom juggernaut that was Friends. Of course, it was never going to achieve the 25 million plus viewers per episode that Friends earned in terms of TV ratings, but How I Met Your Mother's Ted and Robin romance still gave us the closest thing to Ross and Rachel's love story of any show to have aired since. Of course, Friends was about so much more than just Ross and Rachel, and Ted and Robin's relationship in How I Met Your Mother wasn't the story of the whole show, either. The sitcom boasted 5 main characters to Friends' 6, with Lily Aldrin perhaps being a quirky combination of Monica and Phoebe rolled into one. Her college romance with Marshall Eriksen was the show's only enduring successful relationship, with the team behind How I Met Your Mother having figured out their own equivalent to Monica and Chandler from the very beginning. How I Met Your Mother was better than Friends in a lot of ways. It was funnier and more real than Friends. What's more, How I Met Your Mother actually exceeded Friends a lot of the time in terms of both comedy and realism. Ted, Marshall, Lily, Robin, and Barney choosing McLaren's pub as a regular evening hangout spot feels a lot more believable than the Friends gang whiling away their time in Central Perk. Ted Mosby's bad luck in love seems more likely than most of the situations Ross gets himself into in Friends, too, but it's through the character of Barney Stinson that How I Met Your Mother really came into its own in the comedy stakes. A far wittier version and less well-meaning version of Joey Tribbiani, Barney never pretended to be a nice guy, especially when it came to the way he treated women. But his dubious code of conduct invariably led to the show's biggest laughs, and he was ultimately a good friend with a softer heart than he let on. If Barney Stinson showed his misogynistic tendencies, at least he was taken to task by his friends. Meanwhile, in Friends, almost all of the main characters are guilty of homophobia at one point or another, and they're never called out for it. In this sense, the two shows belong to different eras. How I Met Your Mother was probably funnier for the generation that was just coming of age during its first seasons, whereas Friends was playing to the generation before that, yet experienced an upsurge in popularity in the mid-2010s, more than a decade after it ended. How I Met Your Mother's Friends comparisons may have done more harm than good. Despite their similarities, HIMYM had something different to offer. Despite their obvious similarities, then, there are still clear differences between Friends and How I Met Your Mother. The latter show may have been inspired by the former, but it went off in a very different direction when it came to storytelling style and sense of humor. How I Met Your Mother's non-linear narrative and knowing exaggerations of its characters' foibles for comic effect make it a far more experimental sitcom than Friends. On balance, its humor is also edgier and more provocative, particularly when it comes to the worst exploits of Barney Stinson. However, because of its similar setting and characters, HIMYM inevitably got lumped in with other, less original shows deemed to be cheap Friends imitations. No sitcom in the 21st century was ever going to live up to the numbers and global popularity that Friends achieved. Comparisons to the classic 90s show became a burden for How I Met Your Mother to carry, which arguably dented its legacy as a wonderfully innovative sitcom in its own right. HIMYM may not have surpassed Friends, but it has its place in television history. It's still one of the 21st century's best sitcoms. While it's true that How I Met Your Mother will never be revered to the same extent as Friends, which was, and remains, a comfort show for the ages, it's still one of the best sitcoms of the 21st century. The first 4 seasons of the series, in particular, which feature most of How I Met Your Mother's best episodes, deserve their place among the best comedy TV shows of their era. It might actually be the show's final season and finale episode, which continues to polarize fans to this day, that ultimately cost it an even greater legacy, as How I Met Your Mother's controversial finale seemed to fly in the face of what came before it. Moreover, the show's writers led its audience through labyrinthine and sometimes tediously long-winded storylines during its last 2 seasons to set up a climax they'd already decided on years before. Like many sitcoms, How I Met Your Mother declined in quality during its final years. But the same could easily be said for Friends. This decline doesn't make either show less worthy of their place in the pantheon of sitcom greats overall, and doesn't take away from how close How I Met Your Mother came at its very best to surpassing Friends.